Hey everyone, and welcome back to another deep dive.
Yes, welcome back.
This time we're diving into an interview with a man named Charles.
Okay.
And he has some interesting thoughts
Yeah.
about the world and how it works.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So what does he talk about?
He talks about nature, spirit, and commerce.
Okay.
And he thinks these are actually the foundation of reality.
The foundation of reality.
Yeah, like the building blocks of how everything works.
I see. So like a framework for understanding the world.
Exactly. And what's really interesting
Okay.
is that he thinks we often feel powerless.
Yeah.
Or like we're just cogs in a system.
Right. That's a common feeling.
Yeah. And he says that's because we don't truly understand these three elements.
Especially commerce, I bet.
You got it. He thinks commerce is often overlooked.
Makes sense. It can seem complicated and maybe even a little bit intimidating.
For sure. But Charles seems to think that if we can understand commerce better,
Yeah.
we can actually reclaim our power.
Okay. I'm intrigued. Where does he even begin with all of this?
Well, he starts with this idea that nature, spirit, and commerce are like the corners of a triangle.
Okay, a triangle.
Yeah, and love is right in the center, holding it all together.
That's a really interesting visual. I like that.
So I'm picturing this triangle,
Okay.
but how does it actually play out in our lives? It seems kind of abstract.
Well, that's where Charles gets really specific.
Okay.
He says a lot of our modern struggles come from an imbalance in this triangle.
Like one side is heavier than the others.
Exactly. We've focused too much on commerce
Okay.
and neglected nature and spirit.
So we need to find more balance. And how does he suggest we do that?
Well, he points to things like the education system as a prime example.
Oh yeah, he had some strong opinions about education.
He talked about accidental monkeys on a spinning ball.
Yeah, that's right. What was that all about?
Basically, he's saying we're taught a very limited view of ourselves and the universe.
Like we just happened to end up here by chance.
Exactly, and he thinks this leads to a feeling of powerlessness.
Because if we're just accidents,
Right, then why bother trying to change anything?
it's like we don't believe we have the power to make a difference.
That's what Charles is getting at.
So he's challenging this accidental monkey idea,
He is, but he questions the meaning we take from it.
like how we interpret it.
Yeah, if we constantly tell ourselves we're just cosmic accidents, how does that impact our motivation to create change?
That's a good point. It's like we're playing a game where we don't even know the rules.
That's a great analogy, and for Charles, this lack of understanding starts early on.
Really? How so?
He makes this startling claim that birth certificates are actually evidence of corporate entities created for each of us.
Wait, corporate entities? What does that even mean?
He's saying that when a baby is born,
Yeah.
the government essentially creates a corporation using the baby's name.
A corporation?
Yeah.
For a baby? That sounds a little out there.
It definitely raises some eyebrows. Charles describes this process where the mother unknowingly becomes an informant
An informant.
by signing the birth certificate.
Okay.
And then within a few years, the state claims paternity.
Paternity.
And this creates a corporate entity that they can use for commerce.
So they're profiting off of us from the moment we're born.
That's what Charles is suggesting.
But how can they do that? Is there any proof?
Charles points to things like stock issuance numbers on birth certificates.
Stock issuance numbers on a birth certificate. I've never heard of that.
It's definitely something that makes you wonder what's really going on.
It's like there's this whole hidden system operating behind the scenes.
And for Charles, it all ties back to commerce.
So he's saying we're being plugged into this commercial system from birth.
He uses this metaphor of hospitals as docking stations
Docking station.
and doctors as docking agents for human vessels.
Whoa, that's a powerful image.
It suggests we're seen as commodities in a larger system.
That's a pretty intense way to look at it. But how did we get here? Did something happen historically that led to this situation?
According to Charles, there was a major turning point in 1933 when the U.S. declared bankruptcy.
Bankrupt. The U.S. declared bankruptcy? I've never heard that before.
It's not something you learn in history class. Charles claims that as a result of this bankruptcy, all citizens were classified as enemies of the state.
Enemies of the state. That's a serious accusation. Is there any historical evidence to support that?
While the U.S. definitely faced economic challenges in the 1930s, declaring it bankrupt might be an oversimplification.
Okay.
The enemy of the state claim is likely referencing the Trading with the Enemy Act,
The Trading with the Enemy Act.
which was amended around that time.
So there might be some truth to what he's saying.
It's possible, but we need to do some fact-checking.
Definitely. But even if we take Charles's historical claims with a grain of salt,
Yeah.
this idea that we're plugged into a system we might not fully understand is really fascinating.
It is, and that's where Charles's next big idea comes in the concept of trust law.
Trust the law.
He claims that all property ownership is split,
Split.
with the state holding what's called equitable title.
Equitable title.
And we're just the trustees.
Okay, now you're losing me. Can you explain that in a way that makes sense to someone who isn't a lawyer?
Sure, think of it like owning a house.
Okay, I own a house.
You have the deed, you pay the mortgage, you can live in it.
Right.
But according to Charles, the state still holds a kind of ultimate ownership.
They do.
That's the equitable title. They set the rules, collect property taxes, and can even seize your property under certain conditions.
So I'm not really the owner, just a caretaker.
That's the point Charles is making.
It's like we have this illusion of ownership.
Exactly. And it highlights the limitations on our freedom.
Okay, so let me get this straight. We've got this triangle of nature, spirit, and commerce that's out of balance.
Right.
We've got this accidental monkey myth that undermines our sense of agency.
Yes.
And we've got this hidden system of ownership that limits our freedom.
That's a pretty good summary of Charles's main point so far.
It's a lot to process.
It is, and the big question is, what do we do about it?
Exactly. If Charles is right, how can we reclaim our sovereignty in this seemingly rigged system?
That's a great question, and I'm sure Charles has some thoughts on that.
Well, we'll have to find out in the next part of our deep dive.
We will. We'll explore Charles's advice on reclaiming sovereignty and navigating this complex world we live in.
Sounds good.
Ah.
I'm ready to dive deeper.
Me too. Let's do it.